Lena Carter stepped into the sleek, upscale restaurant with the kind of confidence that only wealth and privilege could buy. The soft clink of glasses, the rich hum of conversation, and the faint scent of freshly prepared gourmet dishes filled the air. She was dressed in a tailored designer dress that seemed to shimmer under the warm lighting. Her friends, equally stylish, followed her in, their laughter echoing softly as they took their seats at a perfectly set table by the window. They were used to the finer things in life, exclusive restaurants, high-end shopping, and luxurious vacations. As Lena settled into her chair, her eyes scanned the room, admiring the elegance of it all. But when the waiter approached their table, her gaze faltered. The man was young, maybe in his late 20s, but his face was covered in visible scars, deep, uneven marks that marred his skin. A small, unsettling gasp escaped Lena's lips before she quickly masked her reaction. She leaned toward her friends, her voice low but sharp. "Did you see his face? It's so disturbing." Her friends giggled softly, exchanging amused glances. They whispered their own judgments, barely trying to hide their contempt. Jake, the waiter, remained composed, his eyes meeting theirs with professionalism as he took their orders, but it was clear he had heard every word. Throughout the meal, Lena continued to treat Jake with cold indifference. Every time he approached their table, she barely looked up, her eyes scanning the menu as if she could barely be bothered to acknowledge him. She made sure to emphasize every little mistake he made, turning each one into a point of criticism. When he brought their drinks, Lena glanced at her glass and made a face. "This is room temperature," she said with a sharp tone. "You're supposed to chill white wine, not serve it like it's just been sitting out all day." Jake apologized immediately, nodding with sincerity, but Lena rolled her eyes and leaned back in her chair, making sure her friends heard her mutter, "How hard is it to get a simple thing right?" When the food arrived, Lena picked at her plate, letting her fork scrape noisily against the ceramic as if the food wasn't up to her high standards. "I asked for medium rare," she said loudly, stabbing at the steak with more force than necessary. "This is practically well done. How can you mess that up?" Her friends exchanged glances but said nothing, awkwardly avoiding eye contact. It wasn't like they didn't notice Jake's discomfort, they just didn't care enough to speak up. As the meal came to a close, Lena's judgmental gaze flickered over the waiter once more. When the bill arrived, Lena picked it up and glanced at the total. Without a second thought, she shoved the bill into her purse, then muttered, "If he wants more money, he should at least look presentable." She handed him the receipt, her fingers brushing against the edge of the bill as she handed him nothing more than $1. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, but left small tips, almost out of guilt. They didn't want to seem as cruel as Lena, but none of them had the courage to stand up for the waiter. As Lena walked out of the restaurant, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She turned to glance behind her, just in time to catch Jake's eyes. He was standing by the door, holding it open for the last few departing guests. His face was impassive, but his eyes, they were a different story. There was pain in them, something deep, something raw, but no anger, just sadness. Lena felt a shiver run down her spine, a pang of guilt that she quickly dismissed. She told herself it wasn't her problem, that she was just being sensitive. After all, he was just a waiter. But the unsettling look in his eyes stayed with her, gnawing at the back of her mind. Days passed, and Lena tried to forget the encounter. Her life returned to its normal rhythm, meetings, shopping sprees, and dinner parties. That was until one afternoon, as she was driving through the city, her attention focused on the road ahead. She was lost in her thoughts when something caught her eye. A massive billboard loomed above the street, its bright colors almost blinding in the midday sun. It wasn't an ad for a luxury car or a designer perfume. No, it was something far more striking. There, staring down at her, was Jake, but not the same man she had seen in the restaurant. This version of Jake was groomed, confident, his scars now barely visible, hidden by the flawless finish of a well-done photo shoot. The words beneath the image read, "True beauty lies within, Jake Matthews, burn survivor and model." Lena slammed the brakes in shock, her heart skipping a beat. She couldn't look away. The face she had so casually dismissed just days before was now everywhere. His story of survival, a powerful message. It was like a punch to her gut. Lena's hands tightened around the steering wheel as she sat frozen in her car, staring up at the billboard. The image of Jake's face, so calm, so confident, felt like it was burning into her mind. The words beneath it echoed in her head, "True beauty lies within." But it wasn't the ad that was causing her stomach to twist with dread, it was the memory. The memory of something she had buried deep, something she had pushed aside and tried to forget. The memory of a night years ago, one she had never fully confronted. She blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself, but the images came flooding back, vivid and overwhelming. It had been a reckless night, full of laughter and carelessness. She and her friends had been speeding down a dark road, windows rolled down, the cool air rushing through their hair as they joked about nothing in particular. They hadn't thought about the consequences, not even for a second. But then, out of nowhere, there had been a figure, a man crossing the street. He had barely been visible in the dim light. The car's headlights caught him too late. There had been a sickening thud, a jarring crash that shook the entire vehicle. For a split second, everything had gone silent. Then, chaos. Jake, it was Jake, the young man they hit. She had recognized his face now, although she hadn't known him then. He had been a pedestrian, just walking home, when their car plowed into him. They had stopped for only a moment, long enough to see him crumpled on the ground, blood staining the pavement, but instead of helping him, they panicked. In a blind, selfish rush, they sped off, leaving him behind. Now staring at the billboard, Lena couldn't escape the truth any longer. Jake wasn't just a stranger, he was the victim of their recklessness, and the guilt that had lain dormant for so many years was suddenly suffocating her, drowning her in a sea of regret. Lena couldn't shake the image of Jake from her mind. The haunting memory of that night, the way they had abandoned him, was now clawing at her, relentless and unforgiving. She had to know more. She couldn't move on, couldn't pretend everything was okay, when his face kept appearing in her thoughts. That evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, she started searching. She typed his name into the search bar, her fingers trembling with each click. It didn't take long before the results flooded her screen. Articles, interviews, social media posts. Jake's story was everywhere. As she scrolled, her heart pounded in her chest. She read about the accident, the one she had tried so hard to forget, and what followed. After being hit by their car, Jake had been rushed to the hospital, his body severely damaged. The impact had caused multiple fractures, but it wasn't just the physical injuries that had scarred him. The real devastation had come later. The accident had triggered a fire, and Jake had been caught in the flames. The fire had ravaged his skin, leaving him with burns that covered much of his face and body. Lena felt her stomach turn. The same man she had looked down on, the man she had so thoughtlessly judged, had endured unimaginable pain. He had fought for his life, undergone countless surgeries, and spent years recovering. Yet, instead of letting his physical scars define him, he had found a way to rise above them. Jake became an advocate for burn survivors, speaking at conferences, and sharing his journey to self-acceptance. He used his platform to promote kindness, compassion, and inner strength. His face scarred, but full of strength, had become a symbol of resilience. Guilt overwhelmed Lena like a tidal wave. The man they had abandoned in his darkest moment was the very one who had worked tirelessly to embrace the person he had become. She had been blind, judgmental, and cruel. He had survived against all odds, and yet she had treated him as if he were less than human. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, suffocating her, and she could hardly breathe under the crushing shame. The guilt consumed Lena in a way that made it impossible for her to focus on anything else. Every moment was spent thinking about Jake, his scars, his journey, and the cruelty she had shown him. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She needed to make things right, or at least try to. After hours of searching, she found out that Jake was attending a charity event for burn survivors, an event she knew would be filled with people who admired him for his strength, for his courage. The thought of facing him terrified her, but there was no other choice. She had to apologize, had to try to make amends, though she wasn't sure if forgiveness was something he could ever offer her. The night of the event, Lena wore a simple but elegant dress, the weight of her guilt heavier than the fabric on her body. Her hands shook as she entered the venue, scanning the crowd for any sign of Jake. She found him at the far side of the room, speaking with a group of people. He looked different than the man she had seen at the restaurant. His posture was confident, his face bright, and for the first time, Lena saw not the scars, but the strength in his eyes. She approached slowly, her heart racing in her chest. As she got closer, the words she had rehearsed over and over caught in her throat. The moment seemed to stretch out before her, unbearable. She felt small, unworthy of even being in his presence. When she finally reached him, her voice cracked as she said, "Jake, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say, but I need you to know I was wrong. I treated you horribly, and I'll never be able to forgive myself for it. You didn't deserve any of that." Jake turned to face her, and for a split second, their eyes locked. Lena braced herself for anger, for the harsh words she felt she deserved, but instead, Jake simply smiled, a soft, understanding smile. "I forgave you a long time ago," he said, his voice calm but steady. "I didn't need you to apologize. I knew who you were. I remember that night." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected him to say that. He knew. He had known all along. The shame that filled her chest was suffocating, and she struggled to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. Jake continued, "I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to make you feel bad, Lena. That's not who I am anymore. I've spent so long learning to love myself, scars and all, and part of that journey was forgiving those who hurt me, even when they didn't deserve it. You're not the only one who has had to grow." Lena's knees went weak, the weight of his words crashing over her like a wave. She couldn't hold it in anymore. In front of everyone, in the midst of the bustling event, she broke down. She cried openly, tears streaming down her face as she let go of years of guilt and shame. For the first time, she felt the full weight of what she had done. She had caused him pain, and in turn, he had forgiven her, had let go of his own suffering. But she couldn't let herself off the hook so easily. Not yet. Jake placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's okay. You're not the person you were back then, and neither am I. I've found peace in myself, and I hope you can too." Lena nodded, unable to speak, but grateful beyond words for the mercy he had shown her. She had come to him seeking redemption, but it was he who had shown her what true forgiveness looked like. In that moment, she realized she couldn't undo the past, but she could change her future, and that began with being a better person, one act of kindness at a time. As she walked away from Jake, her heart was still heavy with regret, but there was also something new, a sense of hope, and a commitment to becoming someone worthy of that forgiveness. In the months that followed, Lena's life changed in ways she never expected. The apology to Jake had been a turning point, but it was just the beginning of her journey. She began volunteering at burn recovery centers, spending time with survivors who, like Jake, had endured unimaginable pain. She listened to their stories, each one more humbling than the last. Slowly, Lena learned to see beyond appearances, to recognize the strength and resilience that lay within each person she met. She realized how much she had taken her own life for granted, how easy it had been for her to judge others based on their looks. Lena started donating regularly to organizations that helped burn survivors, channeling her resources into causes that supported people like Jake, people who had faced life-altering challenges and had turned their pain into purpose. It became a new passion for her, one that brought her a sense of fulfillment that she had never known before. Though Lena could never erase the past, she made a vow to herself that she would spend the rest of her life trying to make things right. Every act of kindness, every step she took toward understanding and compassion, was her way of making amends. One day, as Lena walked through the city, she passed by the billboard that had haunted her months earlier. She looked up, expecting the familiar pang of guilt, but this time, she didn't see the scars. She saw strength, the strength that had allowed Jake to overcome everything life had thrown at him. For the first time, Lena truly understood what he had meant when he said, "True beauty lies within." Thank you for joining us in this powerful story of redemption, forgiveness, and the true meaning of beauty. Lena's journey teaches us that we are all capable of growth and change, no matter our past mistakes. It's a reminder that kindness and compassion can heal wounds far deeper than we might realize. If you found this story moving, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more heartfelt stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your own experiences or reflections. And if you know someone who could benefit from this message, please share this video with them. Together we can spread the message of compassion and redemption. Thanks again for watching.